Hi, Ido.
Hello.
A total joy, beyond an honor to have you here. You have been a surprise in my life, and you're here because you're one of the best teachers I've ever had. The way that you taught made me realize what teaching could be in its highest form. And so today, we're going to explore the dance and the intersection between narrative and movement as a storyteller, as a movement maestro. So thank you for coming. It's special to be back in Berlin, where we trained, like a month ago? And I'm curious, what does the city mean to you?
Yeah, I first came here working as a performer originally on some small productions. This city, in one word, maybe freedom, the sense of freedom and the sense of having no real norms or standards, which the way I live my life, it's can match it well. I don't quite live here. I just visit from time to time, but I think that's mostly it.
It's a city, when you say freedom, it makes me think of the freedom that we have in our movement. And that when I started, I felt so intimidated. Like the first day that I was walking into this 2-week intensive, all these voices in my head, like, who are you to do this? There's people that have been dedicating their lives to this 5 to 10 years. And you taught me how to listen to my body in a way that all the years of being a dancer or participating in sport, I was never consciously aware of. And so I thought we would start with that question for those watching. How does one listen to their body?
I think it's an important point and something that is maybe often hiding in plain sight from a lot of people. We're busy achieving, we're busy doing, but we're not really observing, listening, being present with what is going on. And then we tend to receive a little bit different results, different quality of results, one might say. For the external world, it's the same maybe. The achievement is still there. You run a certain speed or you move in a certain way visually from outside. But then for your experience from inside, it's totally different. So first is just to give that space and to give that recognition that one needs to listen, one needs to observe. Totally change the whole way of approaching things. And it can be exactly the same things, the same movements, the same practices, but the how transforms them and is so much more important than the what, really. And then creating a little structure for how to do that, how to start that process of listening, of observing, of sensing. So one of those verbs is not enough. It's an experience of being present with whatever is there, creating empty space, creating silence, so things can be heard, can be appreciated. It's not like those sounds are not surrounding us, the sounds now from outside or the sensations, they're always there. It's more about tuning the station, making sure the knob is correctly placed to receive those messages. And we did that in the event as well, and starting every day through this process, spending an hour of really being in this quietude and then dragging it for the rest of the day from 7 a.m. until 10 at night of trying to be present and feeding it into whatever practices we did, whether it was partnering or some improvisational practice or some kind of an acrobatic practice or whatever it is, but it totally transformed things.
Yeah, it was the most dynamic learning I've experienced, because we would train the physical body for the 12 hours of the day, have a lunch break, and then at night there were these 3-hour lectures. And what I found so moving about that is I was expecting you to talk about just movement. but you showed me the interconnectedness of movement to poetry, to philosophy. You were reading Borges, to literature, to the history. All of it intersected. And so my question to you is, what for you is the intersection between movement and life? Is there any spaciousness, or is movement life and life movement?
I think anything that you pursue deeply with time, the deeper you go, eventually it's kind of that Tauros shape, the electromagnetic, the magnetic force. You go in and you find yourself out. And knowledge of everything is the knowledge of one thing. It doesn't matter if you learn how to make coffee and that's something you research deeply, or you're busy with football, or you're a musician. Eventually the practices take you there. So that's also a point for me after a certain amount of time of researching, starting from physical movement, but then progressing to the bigger concept of movement. And the bigger concept of movement, of course, is informed by stillness and by lack of movement, by emptiness. Of course, they reflect one on the other. And that informs life. Life is some kind of an interplay between those elements. So for me, it was a natural process with aging, with research, with working deeper and deeper and deeper, and not wanting to just maintain, keep a certain perspective, try to protect a certain state of mind, but having the freedom to really keep going, don't get stuck. A lot of the things that I did or discovered or shared or developed, I let them go. Even before they actually kind of like die down, I already let them go. Stop doing it. Keep moving, keep moving. So that is naturally what I also share there, and that things are involved in motion. They are interrelating. Relationships are informed by this movement and stillness, what is moving, what is not moving. And this is our experience of life as well. And there are so many other correlations and areas that we can talk about, but essentially that's how I got more to the wider and wider and wider perspectives.
Yeah, because I think of you as a philosopher above all. And when you speak about it, especially when you talk about letting go, we become so precious with the things that we create. How do you let it go? Like you mentioned that you had worked on some of these practices for years as experiments, and then you found that they weren't serving your students, so you let them go. Is it just an acceptance that there is no such thing as permanence or perfection, that all of this is an evolution, and that to be a teacher, you must constantly be letting go?
Well, it's maybe a function of my way of thinking or my mind, that it keeps digging. It wants to go beyond. So what does that matter? What does it matter? Don't get stuck. There is a deeper and wider way to look at things. And that leads me to just ripping the plaster off many times. So it's not, maybe I don't yet get the feeling of I want to let go, but I don't operate from that place. And part of my practice is not to operate from those likes and those dislikes and those attachments. So first, the intellectual properties informing, okay, this doesn't go the full way, and then I can start to look as, okay, take it off. You don't need that. maybe part of you is still struggling to let it go. You're attached to a certain degree, but the more you do it, the more regularly you do it, the more you feel empowered to do it and less afraid to do it. It might still be painful to a certain degree, but also very freeing. And for every little moment of suffering, you receive also some kind of a reward from the universe, maybe.
So this reminds me of that moment when we were training, and I think it was Ronnie said, "I don't like it." And it opened up this huge philosophical conversation in the middle of training about what it means to do the things you don't like. And I felt emotionally naked in that moment because as an entrepreneur, I basically only do what I want. And when I was training with you, those 12-hour days, I was like, I don't want to do this. I don't deal well with authority. Why did I pay all this money to be the worst one here? And that was a turning point for me where I realized the value of doing the things you don't like. So could you extrapolate on why that's so important to do the things we don't like to do?
Yeah, well, first, doing the things that you like to do is perfectly fine, but believing that the things that you like to do are the things that you need to do, that is very wobbly grounds to stand on. First, it assumes that you are some kind of a formalized being capable of making decisions, having free will, understanding the gist of things, directing and driving the ship. This is definitely not the case. Now, what we like and what we don't like is quite an arbitrary state of events that we tend to put a lot of value into from a very weak point or very weak place. So that is one thing. Now, when you can choose to do what you like and what you dislike, if we take these two black and white decisions, because you're actually moving on this spectrum, and I believe you should move on this spectrum. You should do things that you like, should do things that you also don't like, not in an arbitrary way, but if you do the things that you like, they stem from the weaknesses of your structure, your construct. They stem from certain weaknesses, not necessarily weak points or incorrect things to do, but not necessarily the things that are going to take you to the next level, not necessarily the things that are going to allow you to evolve. Yet the things that we dislike are informed exactly by those weak points. And again, not just dislike for the sake of disliking, but to dig in and to observe, why do I not want to do this? And what happens if I am achieving a way to choose those things and to do them with a conscious choice, not to force myself to do them and grinding through it, which is very common nowadays. This will not get you those deep results that I'm talking about. And I think there is a lot of achievers that found this steroid, this anabolic steroid, like I can do what I don't like to do. But actually inside there is a huge amount of friction and they don't get the deep work really affecting the depth of them. But they get some kind of an outside coat, a coat that sometimes involves numbness, a coat that sometimes involves certain loss of faculties, fine faculties, and not really the transformation of the possibilities of doing what you don't like to do by choosing it truly, by loving it, using your love to do those things. And that is empowering. So I say to people, there is a lot more for us in the areas of our dislikes than in the areas of our likes. And in terms of a practice, I'm not promoting just to do what you dislike. Of course, that wouldn't be also what I'm offering, but it is definitely an area of high value, most bang for your buck in terms of personal evolution, development, discovery, growth.
What was something for you that went from being a dislike to falling in love with the dislike that transformed you?
Most of the things that I do.
Really?
Yeah. Most of the things that I do are stemming from fear, from weaknesses. It's not from this deep understanding that I'm sharing. Originally, it was more coming from a certain sense of requiring to be stronger, feeling my own weaknesses, my own lacks, feeling isolated, feeling incapable, which sent me in the direction of developing myself, developing those faculties, hence dealing with my fears, dealing with my weaknesses. So a lot of people, when they see me or certain attributes or results, they think, oh, it's naturally this area. It's not. Naturally, I would probably be going to the direction of music or a certain intellectual pursuit in the academic, more classical. But I actually ended up doing other things and dealing with fears, like, for example, the martial arts, acrobatics, working with my mind in certain ways where my mind is not really naturally inclined towards doing somatic practices and internal practices that were very difficult for me, still can be difficult for me in certain aspects. So it's almost everything that I share comes from that point, which is connected also to my ability to teach it. My ability to teach it stems from dealing with that. Because if I was inclined, of course, I would have a lot less insight and able to help people work through the process themselves.
Yeah, I felt that you had gone through decades of conscious suffering and conscious choice. And that's why you're able to teach this. And that was actually, of all of the principles that you taught us, one of the most illuminating was that we do have choice consciously. And once we realize that, we can also choose consciously to suffer. And we think of suffering as something quite negative, but the way that you had presented it, it was one of the most important teaching tools that powers a transformation. So could you talk about the differences between conscious choice and conscious suffering?
The word suffering can be misleading to people. It has been used in all kinds of spiritual traditions in certain ways, and maybe that is too fixed for us to use, but we can also think of it as friction. If we choose to move, which move through life, move through processes, evolution, growth, anabolism, if we want to do that, that will involve some kind of a resistance. Once there is a will, once there is a direction, immediately there comes some friction, some resistance. And that is experienced as suffering. Once there was a direction, once there was a will pointing at a certain area, there is a yearning, there is a need. Now there is something battling that. That is experienced as pain, painful. That is experienced as limiting, suffering. Now, if you don't apply any conscious choices in that regard, you still get this friction because you're still moving, even though moving may be randomly. We can just take it as an analogy for now. In a chaotic fashion, I'm just moving through life, but life includes movement. Life includes movement of many elements, not just you. And there will be collisions, there will be frictions, there will be needs. Even the need to breathe every moment includes that. There is a suffering installed into every breath, or else you would not have the motivation to breathe. It is installed within the organism. Every process of digestion, it's such a refined and present thing, just like gravity is pulling us down to the ground and we don't experience it anymore. We were born in gravity, like the fish in the water. We don't even understand how much suffering is surrounding us. And every action that We do. We want to, or else we would just simply not have the motivation to go through things. So if that is the case, suffering is a given, pain is a given. This is part of our reality and existence. Sometimes you hear people praying for the end of suffering. That is praying for the end of everything. That is, this suffering, this pain is offering possibilities. Of course, if that was the case, then what would be the point to begin with? It serves a very important purpose. On the level of physiology, on the level of mechanics, on the level of physics, on the level of spirituality, it is a very important force, this denial. The conscious part is realizing that that is the case, that is what is occurring, and starting to harness that process for your own personal growth and evolution. Not to let it go to waste, but to direct it, a little bit like the water wheel, using the flow of the river to produce something else. It's not really going to stop the river. It's not going to change the course of the water. It's just harnessing it by a very smart manipulation without really affecting the essence of that water flowing in there. This is more, for me, the practice. Using that as a mechanism for growth. Whether it is consciously chosen to begin with, or it is accepted when you didn't choose it, but it is perceived and understood. That is the state of events. That's the current situation, and harnessing even that for your growth. Maybe you are, a loved one died, or a disease, or war breaks, or whatever is happening, but there is still a possibility within that friction, pain, suffering, and difficulties to make lemonade from the lemons.
Yeah. That makes me think about something we talked about exactly yesterday, about how we don't appreciate suffering, and maybe that's why we don't appreciate ourselves. Because to accept suffering would be to accept that that's part of the package of being human, of being alive. So I throw this back to you. Why don't you think we appreciate ourselves?
Well, first, just to reflect on the first part is, installed into the will, the desires, the directions that we employ. The fact that we're not going to accept suffering on every level, or else suffering will not be mobilizing us. So even within the process of harnessing suffering, you are not on every level. This is a very common misconception. Eliminating suffering by realizing that truth. Suffering is still going to be there. That's the whole point. You're not going to get rid of it. You just bring it to a certain layer where you understand the need of it, and having that layer to jump into and to reflect from, you can now direct the process. So suffering will not be eliminated in that way. I am not a believer in those spiritual traditions that are talking about the end of suffering here. Here there will not be end of suffering. That's my experience, my belief, my understanding. About appreciating oneself, well, that takes us to a different place. And why should we appreciate ourselves? That's the real deep question. I think people are trying to resolve the fact that we don't appreciate ourselves. But why deeply inside people also feel, yeah, because there is nothing to appreciate. Because I'm not doing what I can do, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Almost never. So how can I appreciate myself? Imposter syndrome. But on the deep, deep, deep level of being alive, I am here faking something. This is not really what I can or supposed to do, even those who go through great efforts. And I think that is, for me, an essential point of placing practice as a primary way to live for me. Primary way to live. I cannot appreciate myself if I am not in practice. But if I am in practice, even if it's imperfect, and it will always be imperfect, even if I fall down countless times, the fact that I acknowledge that, the fact that I am here to do work on myself, the fact that I am not going to give up no matter how many times I fall down, that brings about a sense of appreciation for oneself that frees us and enables us to live our life and to be better human beings for others, for ourselves, etc. But it first requires that you let go of the shady construct that we call I, usually, with its, likes and dislikes and weaknesses, so we can start to evolve this structure and go beyond that structure eventually as well. So it's like this structure is informed by deeper layers, but it's not it still. There is still some kind of a character evolution or personality evolution that is informed by this, but it's not it as well, which is often something that I think is not so well understood. So there is personality development, or we installed ethics into society, or education, and all these attempts, we are the least moral in history, like that we've been like, and we're not moving in the good direction. We're moving in the opposite direction. Seemingly, we're promoting these higher concepts through education, but practically, we don't go anywhere, maybe even regress in some aspects, where the animals are much more moral and, much more, working with something innate, a conscious, without needing to lean into these shady grounds of these philosophical concepts or ethical concepts. That's why I think people have a deep sense of, I don't appreciate myself. But what can I do about it? Well, you can start to rebel against that self, that shady self, that thing. You can start by taking a step back, observing, listening, starting to perceive how things are done, not falling asleep into these delusions of, I'm doing good, I'm doing this. You're feeding your family with someone else's family. All those like seemingly on the surface level moral concepts and ethical concepts turn out to be sometimes very empty inside.
So this emptiness makes me think of the moment in the Huberman podcast where you talked about practice, and it felt like you were talking about practice as a gateway to the divine. Can you talk about that?
Well, the practice is you are using this toolbox to extend yourself. Extend where? Extend into you can say the divine, the ultimate, the absolute, the one without second, the nameless one, whatever you want to call it, God. That extension naturally moves there, moves everywhere.
Because maybe that's the saving grace. If we don't appreciate ourselves, the mechanism to appreciate ourselves, to appreciate the preciousness of life, is by building a practice. And once we have that practice, we're connected to something transcendent, bigger than ourselves. Am I following that?
Yeah, that is definitely one aspect of it. We tend to lean back. A lot of people reach this recognition. I am nothing. I have nothing. So God. But by doing that, by putting this God with the white beard, or the crucified God, or the God-man, or whatever God it is, Allah, or Elohim, or whatever concept it is, you're kind of, again, you're trying to put the blame somewhere else, or you're trying to put the responsibility somewhere else. You're trying to rely on something, but not with doing your conscious effort. And the whole point is for you to join that God on all levels, because you are part of it, of course. But if within your construct, your current construct, you do not sense that you're part of it, you're on some level not part of it. And that is involving a conscious choice. What is ridiculous is trying to develop consciousness without a conscious effort. And that is almost all of what is offered in many, many, many places, in many, many distorted practices and teachings, masquerading as the thing. As if I'm going to drink, I'm going to drink this beverage and I'm going to get into this place, or I'm going to do this practice, I'm going to stand like this, I'm going to do this with my eyes, I'm going to assume this shape, how is this going to make me, if I don't make the conscious effort? Now, all of those methods work with the fuel of conscious choice. And all of these methods absolutely not work without it. So the essence is that conscious choice. Those are just ways to learn that. We receive the cup and we start to chew on the cup instead of using the cup for what it's supposed to do. Yeah, the emptiness within the cup, that's the real gift of the cup, as Krishnamurti said. So that is for me the essence of practice. I am in practice. I am in life, in practice. That is the same. That's what I'm here to do. I'm here for a seminar. I'm here for a workshop. And I can go through this workshop half-assed and die, or I can actually put a dent on it. I can make conscious effort with my time here to do something, to do something meaningful. For me, everything else, almost, and it doesn't matter how lofty it looks, whether it's charity or, is not of that depth. Because again, charity is another form of a container, and with conscious choice within it, it's a powerful tool, an important tool, but without it, it turns into the same empty vessel. So a lot of people hide behind helping others. But they do not want to help themselves. That is really the essence of why they are going to help others. It's easier to help others. For me, it's something that I'm very careful about, to talk like this place here. I'm talking. But 99% of my time, I am there at work with myself. Not talking about this thing, but trying to work with that within myself. If I do that, then there is a place to share, to help others, to talk. But without it, I have no business doing that. That would be a shady ground to tell people, come hang on to me. I cannot offer anything. So I feel the necessity to apply it every day, every moment, before I came here, after, while, during, all the time. This is a huge pressure, but it's a good pressure that I want to take upon myself. And part of the reason why I am doing things in a certain way, or I don't do many podcasts like this, I believe it's futile. You do too much of it, it becomes that. Or to use fame, or to use money, or to use things in the wrong way, without really transforming oneself first.
That's one of the things I think that struck me about you, is that you were training us and you would go and over lunch train yourself. Like, to be a great teacher, I believe, is to be a voracious student. And so I'm curious to ask this both as a student and as a teacher. What do you most respect when students come to you? With what qualities or characteristics? What are you looking for in a student? Because it's an investment of your life force energy.
Well, first, you cannot expect almost anything, because from the nature of things, you realize that people cannot do much. Well, temporarily things can be done, things can happen. A student might look very promising now, but 5 years down the line, you see that there was no real deep force, or when things are tested in certain ways. So first, this is a learning that I had to go through. I'm teaching since I was 15. So, and maybe even before that, even as a kid, I used to teach, I used to share, and always had this role of a teacher. So it's a realization. It's like, it doesn't matter what people declare, what people say, or even the best intention or their beliefs per specific moment, because their nature is that they are unreliable, unstable, incapable of owning the word. Well, the only way to achieve that state is by going through that, not breaking your word, not breaking your practice, realizing it doesn't matter. Every time there is another delusion of why we need to change things up. This partner, this romantic partner, is not as good as what I can get there, without realizing you are not a good romantic partner to begin with. So what business do you have actually picking and choosing in that way? Instead of working on yourself and allowing the other person to work on oneself, you're trying to find a better partner, which means I am already here. You're the wrong thing in this equation. This is also true for the student and the teacher. I realized I don't need better teachers. I just need to stop. I need to own the teaching that I've received. I need to start somewhere to achieve that stability. This is true for so many aspects. And you see the fruits of such a process because in certain areas of life, we don't get to choose, like our children or our parents. And even then, some people try to choose, try to do something, but it's irreplaceable. So even if I take out this person as my parent, I don't want you to be my parent because you have these issues. You cannot now really replace that in the same way. You will bring another person into your life, but it's not going to be exactly under that same umbrella, that same role. So what is a student? What the student can bring to the table is a deep sense of wanting to go beyond the current state of events, beyond the current self. The more that student is holding on, I know what I need, the less that has a potential to stay. It might develop over time, but really this is the surrender that you're looking for within a student. And many people will disagree, including there is The Circular Ruins, the short story by Borges, where he's talking about the only student worthwhile is the one who rebels against you. On the surface level, he tends to disagree with what I'm saying, but I think that deeply it is the same. He rebels against you, him, and anything. It's not about rebelling against the teacher. And the teacher should offer such a construct as well. So I am here to evolve. I'm here to discover. I'm here to move beyond. I don't know what's on the top of the mountain. I'm climbing the mountain. I don't pretend. What I want, I am aware of, but it's not going to dictate everything that I do. It is part, but there is other things that I'm not informed about. I have a little bit more calmness, a bit more stability. Now I'm ready to go on a long journey of discovery and evolution. That is the essence of a good student. Many people will think that that is lying on your back, that is being too weak. Well, how can you be strong with your current state of affairs? If you are strong, you don't need a teacher. If you have achieved that stability, that divinity, that recognition, good luck, go on your way. You're all good to go. Not in essence to need me, to need a teacher in general. But if we're here to discover, I do not feel that that is a powerful point to have those delusions. I feel that the powerful point is to move beyond the delusions. I am essentially weak. I am essentially unstable, incapable. I wish to extend further. Now I'm in a point of strength. Now I'm in a point where I can move beyond.
Move beyond. And for you, what I so appreciated is that you sprinkled our training with the lessons of your teachers. And you had so many incredible teachers. I wonder if you can share a story of a teacher that broke open your head, as Krishnamurti says.
Well, sometimes I don't know who taught me more, my good teachers or my bad teachers, right? So it's all teaching, moving through these containers. And maybe the highest form of a teacher is to become that purity of the teaching without disrupting it anymore. So the power of the liquid, the water, or the expansion is moving through freely. Yeah, I started in martial arts, and when I was young, and in traditional Chinese martial arts, I did as a kid, and also some Japanese arts. And there it was the 80s, and it was a little bit different, of course, to do some martial arts back then. And I got some great lessons, like, I remember myself, 7 years old, doing knuckle push-ups on the hard floor and banging arms and doing these things, and the smell of smelly feet of the training place. All these experiences, they really shaped me. They really gave me some kind of a relationship that I'm not afraid of effort or of pain in a certain way, and I know how to activate myself in a certain direction. I remember myself on the ground holding my abs, 7, 8, 9 years old, I'm not sure which age, looking through a screen of tears after my teacher, who is like 100-kilo guy, heavy guy, 220 pounds, kicked this kid in the stomach. And he probably kicked me, very lightly for him, but it took out all my air, and I'm through this. And I have to pick myself up, and I'm crying, and I have to arrange myself, and I go back to it. And I wasn't traumatized by this thing. It was like down in a certain way where it offered me something. It wasn't pleasant at the moment, but it offered me something. It gave me some construct to rely on later in life. Where in my house, in my home, my parents never laid a hand on me, and there was never anything aggressive. I remember a few times that my dad raised his voice. That was enough to do something, but nobody ever hit me or something. But my mother realized I need to be also receiving those directions. And since I gravitated towards martial arts, she was happy to give me those opportunities there. I think that was very empowering. Yeah, and then with the years later, I played some soccer, and I did some other things, athletics, and I got into capoeira. And there I met my first teacher, Paulo. And he was also a part of a lot of different areas of discovery relating to my growing up, becoming a teenager, sexuality, putting on capoeira shows for the public without a shirt on the street, traveling to Brazil, getting into fights, having to, learning to do acrobatics on hard floor, crashing in all these areas, learning rhythm and music and expression. I remember this capoeira show we did in Tel Aviv, in Israel. I was like 16, 15. We're putting on a capoeira roda, and after us there is the Brazilian samba dancers with the feathers, bikinis and stuff. And then when I'm taking the break, I'm like, we're waiting behind the scenes, and then the dancer girls comes in and she yanks off her top and remains, topless. And I'm just like 15 years old. I see, this grown woman with, those boobs out. And so it was just like discovering a lot of different ways. I was already in Brazil when I was 15 for the first time. And since then, went every year. I tasted a different culture, a different way to look at things. It was very early on. So it kind of almost merged with my own identity. These were huge lessons. Then later on, I evolved within the capoeira world, and I met my next teacher, who was my main capoeira teacher, and an amazing figure, Master Idan Harari from Israel. And he taught me a lot of things, he took me on. I used to go sleep in his place regularly, and it is far away from when I live relatively to Israel, and so I used to spend some time there. And he showed me what compassion is, where it plays a role, what it means to be a teacher for people. Some of these lessons were very difficult for me to learn. It was almost too late in some ways, and only now I understand how I could not pick them up so quickly. And sometimes I wished I grew within that scenario to begin with. But, you get what you get. And he's an amazing figure of pedagogy, education, morality, ethics, support, but also technicality, understanding how to construct things and how to place them together. And I learned a lot from him. Then later I met one of the people I call my teacher. All of these were my teachers. And by the way, I thank them daily within my practice. In the end of my sitting practice, there is a moment where every day I revisit those teachers that really influenced me, and have gratitude. And my next teacher was another master, David Malka, was shadow yoga teacher. And I was really never quite into yoga in the way that I've seen yoga in the West. But once I met him, I saw there is another. Yoga is not about that. I started to understand a little bit deeper. And he became also a figure of, I often say I'm not a yogi. I did not study yoga, but I studied Dudi. And in many ways, he's a figure that was both a friend and a support and a guiding light in showing me how to look at things, showing me what is important, what is not important. Example that I did not receive before that. Example for silence, example for observation, example for deep practice beyond the physical practice. And is still one of the most important and influencing figures in my life. And of course, my mother is another figure I can talk about, who is my main teacher. And by her example first, which I resisted a lot as a kid, I was the opposite of her in many ways. I slowly saw the great strength in her. And her capacity to be very clean and to be stable and to do. And that was a huge teaching. Another teacher is my boxing teacher. And I say, I don't like to use the word boxing coach because he's a really teacher and life teacher. Yaakov Daskalo, and who is a figure also of pedagogy and education. He has a harder edge, but also very powerful edge to support the people around him. And he also taught me a lot, taught me about emotional modulation and working within pressures, within getting hit in the face, and how to, the psychology of the process and the physiology of the process. And just contributed another aspect that wasn't always there so clear. Who is the coward? Who is the brave? Are they really that different? In which way? Those are just some examples, and I can keep going, but those are main teachers. A lot of people I've learned with, sometimes they use, they say, Ido is my student, but to be a teacher, it wouldn't do justice towards these figures that I spend years with, close by, to call anyone I've learned with something, some technique, some practice, my teacher. And the same, I look at my students. To someone who says, I'm your student, you got to earn that with stability, with work within those parameters. It's not somebody who came for a weekend or a week or 2 weeks or 5 weeks in 5 years. But sometimes people make that effort, and for them it's unique, so they say, I'm a student. It's not quite it, I think, when I look through my life backwards.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Because what also touched me about being in that space for 2 weeks as a total newbie, there were so many people there that were true students that had trained with you for 5, 10 years. And in a world where you can train with anyone, to have that level of loyalty means something. And what you reflected on is also what they reflected, is that you have evolved as a teacher. And you're a different kind of teacher now than you were even a few years ago. Your emotional regulation is different. Can you share what has contributed to that evolution and why you think you're a better teacher now than you were before?
It's funny how sometimes people tell me, wow, Ido, you changed a lot, you evolved, you look different, you speak different, you're emotionally different. And sometimes it's funny, it's like, well, what do we expect? Why is this pointed even out as something unique? Decades are passing, years are passing. It's just that we don't have a lot of people in practice. So because of that, we tend to see something as a finished product. The fire of my youth is not something I want to hold on to necessarily. There is good things there, but there is things that you want to evolve beyond, the way of doing things. So that's the first thing to recognize. If I am not changing, I am not in practice. So as a teacher, I reached it, and now I'm sharing it. This is never the case. No one reaches it here. Here, the essence is one of evolution. Enlightenment in that way is very misleading. As if there is this point, you finish the journey, now you share. My belief is it's only a temporary step. We might not know what is beyond step X, Y, Z, so we can confuse it. That's the end all be all. It's just a trap. For example, I've reached a place where I don't need anything else anymore. I am emotionally stable. Well, isn't this a trap? Isn't that type of enlightenment means the end of one's evolution? And for what? Feeling calm? Feeling good in face of adversity, in face of end of suffering? The end of suffering in that case is total stagnation for very cheap price. If you're truly good, you will embrace all the difficulty again, and even more. So I think that we are sometimes getting caught on all these areas and start to get into stagnation. I can move well, now I'm going to show you how to move well. This is not the case. I am a work in progress. I am a practitioner. Along the way, I can share some insights and contribute, perhaps, to someone's evolution. But if you wish to have someone who reached the top, go somewhere else. Because I don't believe there is such a figure. And within my looking for teachers, that's one of the first signs that I look for. A person inside dynamism, inside movement, inside momentum. There is progress, there is life there. Not someone sitting on a throne.
Thank you. I think so much as I've been traveling and training with different teachers is this pedestaling that we do. And what I appreciated about you is there was no performative aspect to your teaching. Who you were behind closed doors is who you were when you were teaching us. And it's something that I watch for now because I've had you as a living, breathing case study of alignment and integrity. It's very easy to see the charlatans, and there's so many of them. So I want to switch gears and do the dance between narrative and movement, because what strikes me, and my buddy Gilad asks this question specifically for you, is how do you teach the infinite in the finite construct of language?
These are the important thing to realize is constantly to break the containers up. By doing this repeatedly, we must use this, but we crash it. After we swallow the water, we crash the cup. Okay. And we take a bowl. And now the bowl can serve another type of food into us. Then we take a fork, which cannot carry the water, but can carry a piece of meat to our mouth. So first is not to get caught on these containers, and words are some of the most difficult containers to realize as containers, because words are not just anymore within the person-to-person communication, they're within us, and they have corrupted us. And the infinite and the formless is all the time entering forms and entering the finite and entering the containers, so it can be mobilized, used, because it must be carried by something. And then that something can be discarded and the process repeats again. If you do this enough, for example, I often change my terminology. I use the words that I use often to describe certain processes or directions. I replace them. Sometimes I borrow them from one author, sometimes from another, from a philosopher, spiritual teacher, from a certain practice. And that gets people all the time to let go. And there is a little bit different perspective, and they can start to develop more the blurry eyes, the open gaze that sees the infinite, the formless within that movement, for example.
So it's about a freshness of vernacular.
Yes, not allowing yourself to fall asleep into the ways of transmission, into the words. For example, knowing a few languages is already an advantage, as you know, because you have those little different perspectives through different words. Each time it's a tiny bit different. The same thing with physical techniques. If I'm just, for example, a Kung Fu guy, or I'm a Capoeira guy, or I'm a dancer of sort, and I'm using those primary vehicles repeatedly, of course I will be missing the essence of movement. Movement is inside all those things, but the chances of me truly absorbing that are low, because you're constantly delivering it within a specific container with its limitation, shapes, style, etc. So even though the potential is there to know everything from one thing, in reality it's rarely achieved. But if you keep changing, if you keep your chances increase, and that's part of why I am promoting the way of practicing in the way that I am promoting it. And that is one way, to not get caught too much on that. The same thing happens with principles, not just words, techniques, descriptions, terminology, even principles must be changed. But we tend to want to hold on to specific sets of principles. Those are the principles of narrative therapy. Those are the principles of X, Y, Z. There is no principles. The principles are also not that thing, that formless thing. They are pointing at it, but they should not be confused with it. Hence, I work with many different systems of principles. And every time I take them, I crumble them, and I throw them away again. That frees me up to have the potential to see, perhaps, beyond, if I do it smartly, repeatedly, again and again.
So this makes me think about this excellent book that you recommended, Bohm, a physicist, on dialogue. We don't have dialogue anymore. We speak at each other. We speak to each other, but we don't speak with each other. Where do you see the intersection between movement and dialogue here?
Well, movement, again, like it's a very open word, but whenever you're moving, you're in dialogue with everything around. Sometimes we assume dialogue happens when it is placed in a very specific, now there is a place for dialogue, now dialogue is happening. No, dialogue is happening all the time. Dialogue is happening with the rays of lights now that are coming in through and going into the camera. Dialogue is happening between us. There is vibrations going on. And movement represents that deep essence of dialogue. So you're in dialogue with the environment, with your sensations, with everything. And that dialogue is a lot more in line with Bohm's concept of dialogue, where he's directing it to human dialogue. This was his legacy of trying to leave us something. It's like, stop negotiating. You're not in dialogue. You are just negotiating. These constructs are already fixed, so there is no dialogue. And that's the intersection. That's really it. If I'm deciding how I'm going to move in a specific scenario, whether it's physical movement or other, I'm already fixing it, and I'm not in essence, I'm not understanding the essence of my dialogue with other forces. I'm forcing myself. I'm in collision to other things, and I'm erasing them. I am ignoring them, or they will be breaking me up, also possible. So a disease is a dialogue, right? Like something happens within us, and again, we're fighting it, we're cutting it out, we're taking this, we're killing it. But sometimes we discover that the disease is an attempt to protect ourselves from something else, something deeper, much more dangerous. And it goes on and on and on. That book I recommend to a lot of people because it opens the mind into how limited we are in the way that we communicate.
We are so limited, and the great irony is, as a storyteller and teacher of story and teacher of human connection, I find that words not only can be some of the greatest source of divisiveness, weapons. One word can be an entire weapon because you say a word and it has already the imprint that as you say it, you have no idea, but this person sees that word in a completely different lens than you do. And so now, like for instance, masculine and feminine, I refuse to use them in my work with men because as soon as I say masculine, the brain conflates and thinks male, feminine thinks female. So what do we do when words are at best blunt tools? They're not precise. What is beyond words? And what I'm learning is actually the nonverbals. That's how we create dialogue, is the energy, the eyes, the tone, how you carry yourself in the room, the intention. How does that person feel around you? Are they safe? Are they skeptical? How do they feel inside themselves? So my curiosity is, how do we use the power of story to leverage transformation? That's the heart of my work, is understanding that. I'm curious if you have any thoughts.
Well, those are nice thoughts. We should also be careful not to glorify non-verbal gestures or for something that is devoid of that issue, because it still has that same issue. I think the solution is relating relative language. If there is a spectrum, and here there is feminine and here there is masculine, then I understand what you want to tell me. If I tell you hot, it relates to the cold. So using that relating thing is very foreign to us because we shorten the way. We want to condense more pieces in. Our culture moved into trying to condense by stripping them off. The knowledge that we transmit is extremely limited, oversimplified. The knowledge is oversimplified from its essence. It is a representation. It is a symbolic thing. So knowledge cannot be that thing itself. It always is a small picture of the real thing itself. Things are non-coherent by essence, not coherent. So our looking for coherency in that way is totally misguided. We should be looking for the coherency within the relativity of things. We should be investing more time into that relating area. So for example, within movement, I use a lot of organizational teaching tools where they're looking at two elements or more, but at least two, how they relate to each other. Instead of saying, this is how it should be. It's like, this is in relation to this. Now examine the relationship between them. Instead of focusing just on the pen or just on the cup, let's examine how they relate to each other in different ways. We're not used to looking at that connection. That is one thing. To educate ourselves and next generations to have that point of view, that interrelating point of view. And from there, we start to open a space for dialogue, because immediately this is the dialogue between the elements, right? This relationship is also a dialogue. Now we see where we stand. If I examine my distance to you and my relation to you, now I examine what I'm truly saying here. But if I'm just busy saying it, I'm just colliding, I'm ignoring you, I don't also know where I am. Because where is the sensation of self right now, sitting on the chair? Isn't it informed by the sense of the chair under the seat bones, the pressure, the sense of gravity, the sense of heat? This is all relationship.
So proprioception is all relationship. So is perspective. So is perception.
Yeah.
Those three.
And more. And many more. It's an examining of the relationship to other things. The environment, we call it, but the environment is even within us. There is an environment within the environment. So it's endless relating.
We're creating stories about all of this.
Correct. So that leads me back to your question about stories. So my point of view these days to work, I always worked with stories, but the more time passes, the more I realize the real tools of teaching, deep teaching, are parables, tall tales, riddles, lies, encryptions, secrets, difficulties, etc. This is the direction. Why? Because this immediately places the listening side, the other side. Well, it's not honest to say it's listening because it's also in dialogue. But for the sake of explaining simply now, we'll call it that way. In a place of openness to examine the relationships. instead of just absorbing the story as it is, you are now at work, examining your relationship to the parable. What is it trying to say here? So all of this, I'm sure, is pretty clear. Well, we don't like these things anymore. Allegories, parables we're still kind of okay with. Definitely, we don't like the word lies. We have like a negative connotation, even though we're busy all the time living our lives through lies. It's the cement that holds everything together. Our society, our relationships, our sense of self, deep lies to ourselves. And also, of course, riddles. People hate riddles because it makes them feel stupid, incapable, etc. Yet all of these are missing form for us in our way of teaching, transmitting stories, etc. Our stories became too detailed, missing out on real essence. The old stories don't make sense to us because we want them to make sense immediately without any conscious effort. And those were not the old stories. They are powerful encrypted crystals with information inside of them, and you have to decipher it. And lies are the essence of any transmission. Nothing in transmission can be truth because, again, like it's an extrapolation. It's not fully correct or true. So lies are the essence of everything. So if you assume that everything is a lie, now you are at work. Now you are at practice. Now you are on your way to understand. But if you just take things as they are, the conspiracy theories are just an example of something that was always there. We just want to accept it. But on the other hand, we like to think that everything we feel inside, everything, they have lied to us. They all the time lie to us. And in these two things, it creates this movement of conspiracy theories. One thing is, I feel like I've been lied to all the time. The second thing, I want to believe now, still, again, to something else, which is within that process, I think a lot of people get activated and connected. Yeah, so those are some thoughts on stories.
Oh, I super appreciate it. It's speaking to your mother, who was a narrative therapist. It made me understand your appreciation of story. One of the things that I think is really powerful, and you do too, is the re-examination of stories. And so I do this when I teach on stage. I do this one-on-one. I do this with myself. And I was wondering if you would do this with me today. I'm going to give you a piece of paper, and on one paper, we're going to bury a story, and on the other paper, we're going to give birth to a story. Yes. And because I think people have this perception of you as like, you have it all figured out. And what you're so generous with in your teaching is revealing, I'm a human. This is a work in progress. So I'll do this as well. Imagine that your life is a garden of stories. And in this garden, there are weeds that have been disguising themselves as plants and flowers. And these weeds are sucking out the essential nutrients of the fertile soil of your soul. And so instead of cutting a weed at the top, it'll just grow back. We're going to get down on our hands and knees and we're going to pull these weeds out. And these weeds of stories may have been there for a year, months, or decades. But they no longer deserve a place because we've brought conscious awareness to them. So at the top of your paper, you can write RIP. I'll do it too. So what is a weed of a story that you want to pull out and bury today? Would you be willing to share yours?
Sure. I am all alone. It's me versus them. It represents a story from like a sensation that arose from all kinds of things that happened in childhood, being left out, being alone, finding myself isolated. Hence, no, I cannot rely on anyone. Now I have to produce my own grounding, my own battery, my own independent source of power.
So you became hyper independent through that narrative.
Yeah.
And so this narrative got you where you are, but do you think this narrative is going to get you where you're going?
No.
So let's throw it away. Mine was, I'm not enough. And that was because my father walked out when I was 21. And I had this feeling like, if only I was better, he would have stayed. And so the way that this weed of a story manifested is, I have to be exceptional. I have to show him that I was worth waiting for or staying for. Okay, so this is the fun part. Now you have a hole in this garden of your life. And imagine in your right hand, there's like a little seed, a zernoshka. And you put the seedling of a brave new story in this hole, and you put the soil on it, and you hope that sunshine and rain will come and a beautiful plant or flower will grow. So at the top of the page, write brave new story. And this is what you're filling that hole where the weed used to live.
Okay.
Borges would be proud of this mini novel. Would you be willing to share your brave new story?
So we're all alone, same as me. We are all we need if we consciously involve ourselves.
Tell me about consciously involved.
Yeah, I think that sense of we are alone, that sense of we cannot join is because we don't involve ourselves, consciously choosing to rejoin, to be part. So actually within that sense of isolation comes a letting go of the responsibility, and that limits us.
I also like that because I think the real pandemic is loneliness. And that speaks to the fact that you can choose a different path. So now we make a little airplane and we fly it into the world. My brave new story was, I'm more than enough. I am thriving and loved and lovable. Because I think one of the things about abandonment, whether it comes from your father or from your mother, is this feeling like you are defective and that you're not lovable. And it took, 16 years for me to understand I am. Okay, ready? Set.
Do it.
Go. So bad. Okay, we're going to work on my airplane. Hello, new and old friends. My name is ViKA. I'm a speaker, storyteller, and strategist running my own advisory called Brave New Story. For many years, I've been traveling the world, speaking on stages, and often people come up to me after and they want to continue working together. And I've been able to do so in a one-on-one way. As I've been building community in dinners around the world, talking about various topics, I've recognized how valuable it is for us to come together in the pursuit of expanding our perspectives. So, for the first time ever, I'm going to offer a hybrid course for transformative storytelling for leaders. It will include 6 private sessions with me and 6 group sessions. And together we will grow, we will learn, we will study, we will investigate, we will re-examine the power of narratives for leadership as much as for love, at home as much as for at work. And in doing so, my hope and my sincere belief is that you'll come out on the other side of this 12-week immersion, not just a better storyteller, but a better human being, more prepared with the tools needed to navigate uncertainty with emotional agility, to understand and perceive the world through a truer lens, and to be able to regulate your emotions so that you are meeting the moment as it is and enhancing and amplifying more peace and more power in the world. I hope you'll join me. I have details pending. If you're curious, go ahead and send an email to ViKA@ViKAtalks.com. Applications are open. One of the things that I really believe makes life meaningful is the stories we tell ourselves, the stories we tell the world, and the people in our lives that we share those stories with. Specifically, my work centers around relational health and wealth. So I work with a lot of guys, particularly guys that are sold this narrative by their society that if you do this, if you get all these check boxes, you build your power, you build your bank account, then you can get the girl. And it's a very destructive process because they have to emotionally amputate themselves to belong. And they want love so badly, but they don't think they're worth love. And so I know this is outside of the realm of usual movement podcast conversations, but if you would be willing to share your journey into understanding love, I think that would be really powerful.
I think that word, love, has so many hues and textures, and we tend to paint it and use different points of view each time we discuss it, and from that confusion arises a lot of problems. Like there is some kind of a bodily love, and you can think of it as a physical love. Sometimes we call it by another word, sexuality or attraction, but it is a form of a craving of the flesh, of the meat, the smells, the connection that is perceived by the instinctive faculties, etc. Then there is more of an emotional kind of connection, which is usually what is referred to by women more than men, but all of our society mostly points at that direction. And that is clear, that romantic love. And then there is another attribute which is closer to the original use of this word love within the old spiritual practices, whether it's in Buddhism or in Sufism and more. And this is more relating to conscious choice, conscious, not connection, not just an attribute from the essence of it's there or it's not there naturally. This is more the body orientation, this is more the emotion orientation. But here, since it's conscious, it is a decision-based, I love you. That deep sense of taking responsibility, of choosing, that is really what the original word is used for, but we are distorting it into some kind of a romantic or sexual bodily orientation. So that creates a lot of issues where we try to serve one of those layers of love and we don't understand that it occurs on all layers. For example, someone who is I'm sexually attracted to is definitely important, but sexuality transforms and changes, and it's something that we have to transform and change with. It's not going to stay if you don't work at it. Romantically, since we are a work in progress, chances of us loving that person 20 years from now in the same way is also not logical and doesn't make sense. Hence, again, you have to transform that romantic thing that is there to begin with. And the third is the most important element, is me choosing to be involved here, to love another person, a practice, a state of mind. That is the most powerful aspect that informs also the rest in many ways. I'm not glorifying it as the only thing. There is all these layers interrelating, but this is something to think of. And then this achievement thing, this is, pretty immature, limited state of, I need to achieve X, Y, Z to tick those boxes. I'm going to get the girl. This possession thing, I'm going to possess this. This is going to come to me. If I want to have that girl of that high, that level, I'm going to do this. This is something I feel not very connected to. It is very empty. It is very limited. It is trying to do something and doing the exact opposite. And this is very Western state of mind, very Occidental state of mind and I think it's misguided and hurts us. And under this disguise, we try to soften it and put podcasts around it and put slogans and kind of serve that thing as how to achieve the $1 million and how to achieve the girl of your dreams or whatever. And I think this is pretty lame, pretty low. I don't think that we should serve that direction. I think that we should work on ourselves towards a deep understanding of ourselves and of love from that perspective. And from there comes good things. Good things will flourish from there. So I understand that there is whole industries, and I understand that many people don't like to hear about something else, or maybe there is no alternative structure yet to rely on, so it's very difficult to let go of this. But ultimately, I think that a lot of good will be happening to us if we understand that deeply. If you look at old school relationships, even fixed marriages, fixed partnering, which sounds totally foreign for us these days, but it actually now can be observed through a totally different light. Things that we thought evil, things that we thought leave us out of it, are sometimes leaving us a lot more involved within it than we think. We misunderstand them. We judge them through history, through the point of view, in post-mortem. But I view them now very differently. Not that I'm suggesting let's go back. In order to go beyond, you have to go through. We are in the through. We should be busy with that. But it's also should be understood for what it was essentially, not what we think it was now with our modern state of mind, where we choose. I want to choose. I choose everything. Actually, you don't choose. It chooses through you. You have this inclination, that inclination, and then the thinker proves what this desire, this instinct wants to do. And you create all these beautiful theories on why what you're doing is the correct thing, where essentially it comes from just a tendency, a predisposition, a weakness many times. Taking responsibility, deep responsibility for that, exposes a real love, a love that can go through mountains. Loving kindness, metta, also relates to that. It is not something that I am expected to feel. I don't feel love towards that person. I must not love that person. Versus, I choose to love.
Love is a verb.
Yes. I choose, but we don't have that capacity yet. We are working on it, so we feel, I love this. You're just attracted to this. It's just like certain circumstances brought you to the place where this is, I love big boobs, I love small boobs. It's
a superficial layer.
It's a superficial layer. And it's not involving you deeply. It's not about you. It's about something that moves, courses through you.
For those of us that haven't experienced the transformative power of love, and I would consider myself in this pool, because I don't think I've ever had big love with a capital L. I've had little loves. I've had lust. I've never experienced what you are talking about, the third layer. How do you know it's true? And can you share personally, how has it transformed you as a man?
Well, to know that it is true is not a knowing, it is an experience. First, you understand the conscious choice that has to be part of that love. Like logically, you know, but that's not enough. Then you must apply by choosing. What happens when your daughter or son are born and they're now here, and you look, you hold the baby, and you don't feel love? What happens now? And it happens often, and rarely is it talked about or mentioned. Can you love that child? No, because always you waited, either you love it or you don't love it, but you're incapable of choosing. And that child might have the wrong smell or look like he reminds you of your uncle or whatever reason it is, but you're not capable now of loving. Are we capable of loving our parents as they deserve? Well, we might not feel love from a variety of circumstances and issues up to them or not. We are constantly held back by this. So first is to understand, first is to know, then to understand, and then to apply by choosing. Choosing again and again, and it's part of the practice. For example, to love the practice. Not when it makes me feel good. That's a hobby. A practice is I love deeply and believe in what I'm doing, and that empowers me. So most of the practices, for example, that I practice these days, they are not really giving me that knee-jerk reaction of like, wow, what a fun thing. Not at all. And I can spend hours daily doing them. It took me decades to reach that point where I can choose, I want to do this. I truly believe in this and want to do this now. Not I feel like doing it. That's not being capable of love. Of course, I need to respect places where I also do what I like to do temporarily, feeding those layers or sexually being attracted. It's important right now because I'm limited. I haven't moved beyond the flesh. I haven't moved beyond my emotion. So it's something to take into account. But also, where do we say stop? There are things in you that I don't like, but I choose to love you in spite of them. Because there comes a point where I need to make a conscious choice and to say, I'm not going to get the full package. You're not going to get that perfect package. It's not going to happen. When are you going to say, stop? I stay here and I work on myself and I allow that other person to work on her or himself as well. That has been transformative to me. Instead of looking for that, teka la sheka, we say. It's like some kind of a natural connection. It fits like this. Instead, looking to create myself and to interlace. So I'm examining what is needed here, and then I come in and I fit myself into that. Maybe my original shape was like this, but it doesn't fit. So I say, I go somewhere else. Instead, no, I say, stop. Can you transform? Oh, that's how it goes. That's letting go of a lot of things that we hold so precious and holding us back.
Thank you for sharing that. It makes me think also about how, in especially Western perspective, we have this rigidity about the qualities we want in a partner, in a romantic relationship. And I don't think that's actually true. I think what we're looking for is the feeling that we feel around that person. And I don't know which school of thought you subscribe to, but given that you lived on this earth a couple of decades, what are the qualities that you now recognize or the feelings that you now recognize are important in that third layer of love as it pertains to romantic partnership?
Go back to the answer on student. What am I looking for in a student? It's exactly the same. Only here, there are other supporting attributes, romantically, emotionally, physically, that should be addressed. It should be there. One might say humbly, good enough. If it's good enough, those areas, now you can also apply the real work, which is conscious work. You don't need perfect. There is always a guy that will be richer or looks better. When do you say stop? When do you say stop? It's not the point. Good enough. Right? Why? To serve my current limited self. To say, I need a little help here. I need to feel that attraction. I need to feel that thing. But 40 years from now, when your tits are on the ground and his testicles are on the ground, it's going to have to move into that. It's going to have to expose that conscious choice that you will require for most of your life. For most of your life, it's not going to be, not just when you're 80, but most of these decades that you plan to pass through together, decades of transformation, you're going to need that support. The sexuality is going to be, 5 times a week, 2 times a week, 1 time a month, whatever. The emotional connection will be taken care of from the essence of evolution. So even if there is limitation emotionally at the moment, but there is a desire to move beyond, this will take care of it. But the most important thing is a fellow journeyman for this transformative process. So I'm not suggesting to eliminate those romantic layers, sexual layers, but I suggest to also look at the most important attribute, even though it is currently might not be on the surface level. That's what you're looking. Are you here to work on yourself? Or are you here as a finished product, offering me this great package? Smells fishy.
I think so much of the dating woes that we face is also because we lie to ourselves. And if we lie to ourselves, we lie to others. It was like I was on a date with this guy, and he talked about his ex-girlfriend on the first date for 45 minutes. And I had to resist the urge to like coach or mother or therapize him through it. And I just let him talk because I sensed this is maybe raw. 45 minutes into it, I look at him and I'm like, are you emotionally available? He goes, yeah, of course. And I asked again, are you sure? I don't want to waste my time. Yeah, of course, I am. I wouldn't be here if I wasn't. We had a wonderful night. He made plans for a week later to take me out to this famous fado. Never called. And in that moment, I realized I can't be mad at him because he genuinely thinks he is emotionally available. So, to those people that are single and watching this, how do we navigate all those layers of love in a world where we're living in our own delusions?
We must get involved with working on ourselves and practicing. And in that moment, you realize that it's less important. All these holds, all these, finalized things. He will call, he doesn't call, he understands, where is he at? Well, I'm on my way. I'm employing my work here. Now let things take care of themselves. And they will. Because there is nothing final about how you approach things. I deserve. What do you deserve? Well, I don't feel like I deserve much. Because I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do yet, to the level that I wish to do it every day, a little bit more. So, what sense of entitlement can I have? Actually, we have a great disease. This disease is not called that way. It might shock a lot of people to hear. It's called self-love. A lot of people declare, I don't really love myself. I have an issue, and there is all therapies about it. But actually, I believe that deeply, there is a deep sense of self-love in there. Those who did not have it already committed the suicide. Those are already a work in progress. It can be extreme to that place or to this place. I'm not suggesting to eliminate these outer self-love, lack of confidence, etc. But once you are employing this transformative force on yourself, now you can deeply love yourself. I am a work in progress. So I can stop, I can let go. I am already a human being trying its best here. Without this, very tricky, very tricky. The self-love deludes me as if I deserve a better partner, I deserve a better... What makes you qualified for that? If you're not a great partner yourself, we tend to think highly of ourselves. The thinking highly can only come from some kind of conscious efforts on our side and working on ourselves to release our tight hold of these delusions. And from there comes beautiful things.
So speaking of beautiful things, what is something that romantic love has taught you that you couldn't have learned on your own?
Not much. Not much. It's because you specifically said romantic love. So maybe the broken heart of teenage years is what taught me the most. But it also created other forces in me because I did not have an alternative structure, so it numbed me. Oh, I'm never gonna get hurt like this again. So I totally closed down the knob on all these risky emotions and states. I don't want to experience that again, so I rather just tune this off. That's something that taught me eventually to realize it and to realize that was happening. But to love in that way, to be intoxicated in that way of love, I don't want to glorify that. It was a very intoxicating feeling when it happens, real love, when you realize you love something more than yourself, but you're also intoxicated. You are also not consciously involved with that. So it's a little bit like those drug experiences. They might show you something down the road, and you might employ that in one's practice, which is where these things come from, but most people abuse them. And eventually it does not become a conscious choice, it becomes exactly the opposite, a non-conscious choice. Here I swallow this and it will be done to me. And love is not that much different in that way, this romantic love. You know that in Will Hunting, in that movie, which I like a lot, he talks about, okay, love, he tells them, you never knew real love. You don't know what it means to be years in hospital next to your wife, seeing your soulmate goes away. That's a conscious thing. That is more synonymous with that. That is a cultivation of something. I choose to be here. Sometimes even those processes are driven from a sense of guilt, a sense of, I have to do this. What would people think? Not from a real deep choice. But that is for me a little bit pointing at a better direction of choosing, being there. So romantic love as it is, it's a powerful drug. But without the conscious part of it, it's still limited in my eyes.
One of the things that you just spoke about really resonated because I've heard this so many times. I had an experience in my youth and the sheer force of my emotions scared me. And I realized I didn't want to feel that vulnerable again. So I shut it down. And it's almost like a rite of passage for many guys, this emotional numbness. which over time creates emotional intimacy issues. And so then they spend the next 2 decades of their life so hungry for connection, but so terrified of it. So can you walk me through how you got to the other side, where you moved from the numbness to the feeling? Because I see you as a deeply loving person who feels and receives love from family, from partnership, from students. How did you de-numb yourself?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a process, and I always am feeling very much a work in progress in that regard, not a finished product again. But I think where it comes from, it's just like banging into the walls one more time, seeing this doesn't go beyond that point. For example, toughness in that regard, as you point out, a lot of guys are using that toughness. This is not the real toughness. This is a toughness of many people in special operations and in fire department and many great men. But this is actually a fake toughness, a toughness of a coat of numbness, a coat of insensitivity that allows you to go through the fire. But the moment that coat is cracked, and then you are exposed, you have no true strength. It is an external attribute to you, to your deep self. You are preventing your deep self from meeting those forces because they're incapable of withstanding those issues. That is the male issue these days. And what you're pointing is like creates a lot of problems with intimacy and with a lot of things, but it's like forget about intimacy between men and women or sexual partners. Intimacy with oneself. To be intimate with a situation. To be capable of being intimate with a situation. That is even deeper, Franz. They are hiding even from themselves. A deep sense of shame from oneself, a deep sense that is just showing you careful where you're walking here, because this is very fragile. So instead of developing that depth, we are just putting on more and more coats. Same as what technology did to us. We're changing the temperature 1 degree higher, 1 degree lower. We can match everything, but we are so vulnerable for it. If something a little bit goes astray, you are now going 3 days without eating. You're out with the elements. You'll be exposed. Everything will destroy you. We're incapable. We've lost sight of what is important. That is not the machoism of ancient cultures and traditional cultures. We sometimes view them again through our modern state of mind, modern point of view, through eyes of very violent, very crude, but sometimes they contain deep sensitivity, deep softness, rituals which we cannot understand, practices which we cannot understand. We tend to wrongly interpret them. So what is that process? Well, that process is a process of gradual release, gradual let go. Let go of what? Of that protection. You must not use that protection. And what you will discover, even a small blow of air can feel like a terrible acid, because your true deep essence is extremely vulnerable and weak, but you have to start somewhere. So even though you're capable of taking a lot of strong damage seemingly with your coat, you're now employing a different process of going to the feather massages. You go to the massage therapists who specialize on the feather massage, and you remove all your protection, and it's brutal. The feather massage is just brutal, but you have to start somewhere. And if you're incapable of releasing the hold, of letting go of that protective layer, you're not employing that process. You're going back to the other process, which you already did most of your life. So it does not take you further. And that is that process. It's a gradual process. When a woman meets a man, in that classical, let's be dogmatic and stereotypical, that woman can expect from the man the depth of that intimacy, and it's just not going to happen. There has to be a gradual practice of how to get there, because it is feeling unbearable. It is feeling very, and again, it might not be understood from the other side, the same as other things cannot be understood. But that is really the process of working. And I believe in that process also within movement. Like, for example, the emotional modulation drills that I developed and I taught in the event that you were part of, where I'm telling people, I don't care if you can take all those shots and somebody can stand in front of you with boxing gloves and hit you and you can take it. I don't allow you to protect yourself and to cringe and to even have the emotions dysregulated. You must take ownership of that. And what do you discover? Light contact is all that it takes to feel the jumpiness inside, the vulnerability. But now you're starting to work on something else. Yeah, this shouldn't be confused, by the way, with those hitting each other in the face and trying to get tougher. It's exactly the opposite process, but maybe viewed from the outside can seem the same, but it's not.
It just strikes me as the thing that we fear so much is actually the thing we must do. If we are terrified of being emotionally naked, we must become emotionally naked. If we're terrified of being destroyed, okay, destroy yourself, because the fear is greater and the cost is greater in indulging that fear for the rest of your life than being brave enough to try a different way.
That's very true. We don't understand the cost of those things. They add up and our life is just lost for meaningless little things like avoiding certain discomforts. Run it down the line, 30 years down the line, your life became meaningless because of little decisions day to day. So it's definitely true, but it's not like we can do it in one moment as well. The other side is like to say, start to involve yourself with the process. Yeah. You don't have to perfect it or to dive too deeply. Start to be busy with a very light process and slowly progress it onwards, but be aware of the necessity of such a process to remove those coats.
Yeah, I like how you talked about intimacy before we even get to talk about intimacy between two people, whether it's your friend or a lover, facilitating the process of becoming more intimate with the self. And I think that's why COVID was so hard for so many people, because it was the first time they were confronted with, you are here on your own. You don't get to play a role outside of this house. And in fact, sometimes you're multiple roles in one day or in 1 hour. You're a powerful leader and you're a mother and you're a wife or whatever it may be. So this process of becoming more intimate with the self, I think, is also connected to removing the delusions of the self. And you have worked with some of the most incredible minds across multiple categories, top athletes. And I have also worked with people that have reached very high esteem. And I think what's interesting is we are trained to believe that if we make enough money, if we get the fame, there becomes this point of enlightenment. But often it's surprising, it's actually the opposite. Can you speak about the myth or the delusion of what's driving most people in society and how that's actually not the nectar of life?
Well, what you don't have, if you don't have X, Y, Z, you are constructing your belief system from far away about those things because you don't have them. And that is shaped by our society, messages surrounding us, etc. So, of course, we have a wrong idea, especially poor people have a wrong idea about what money is going to do. Also, rich people have some wrong idea, but from another way. Or having a partner. If I only have a partner, everything will be okay. Well, you'll be two broken people together instead of one. You still need to work on oneself. It's not going to fix you, the fact that you have a partner. It's not going to facilitate your conscious choice. So I think this is like what is shaping us and driving us forward. A lot of these messages, and very distorted messages. And very few people say, the king is naked. You're going to get it. And then what? Then you're back to square one. That is a gift of achieving things. That is the one gift that they give you. And many people deny that gift, and they keep on somehow deluding themselves into the next level. So if they make $1 million, they say, no, I need 10. They make 10, they want 100, then they want 1 billion. Instead of realizing, I'm walking here in circles. Actually, I'm increasing difficulty and moving away from deep personal growth and development by pursuing this. I need to balance myself out, because I realized that making 10 millions did not fix me, did not fix the world around me. And the same thing can be said not just for money making, but I can also spin it into an area where people will not expect, like, for example, on charity work, or for example, on doing a lot of other things, as if I do this more, things will be right.
Or even fancy movements.
Fancy
if
movements.
I can get the backflip, if I can.
Yeah, I'm going to have, or the body shape. And then what? And then what? That body is not going to be sustainable. All your charity work will be swallowed within the general evil forces. Yeah, but I did my best. Well, to do your best is to do consciously first. It's not just to do in that way that it is done through you. Your body is going to deteriorate, wrinkle, crack, break, disappear. These are the essence of things. I'm not saying it to annihilate everything and to move away. I'm saying it because we can employ a different process of deep choice.
So what are we left with? If everything is going to fall apart, if all of the fame, the money, the status are delusions of the mind, what is the bones of the house we built over our lives?
That deep conscious choice, that deep conscious awareness, that deep sense of discovery and evolution, that orientation towards realizing what is this, what is going on here, what is the deep essence of things, and how can I go beyond those forces trying to pull me back down to the ground that are required from that conscious choice part. Because if it wasn't difficult, impossible almost, then there wouldn't be a need of a conscious choice. But if you wish to receive that possibility of choosing, you need the resistance. You need that difficulty. You need to move beyond the flesh. You need to move beyond the bones. And that is an amazing thing. And along the way, you receive a lot of moments, ups and downs, but they shouldn't be confused for that depth. There is youth, which is energetic and powerful, and there is money, there is sometimes luck, sometimes not. But everything is now taken in a different perspective. It still occurs and it still rattles the boat, but everything is happening within a bigger construct, which frees you and make everything meaningful instead of everything meaningless.
Yeah, I believe it was Einstein who said there are two ways to see the world. One as though everything is a miracle, and one as though nothing is. And I think it's a much more joyful, meaningful existence to let awe be a navigation. Like the smallest conversations. It's why, for me, speaking to strangers is a practice of humanity. If I can't connect to someone for 11 minutes in the car as they're driving me, what am I doing? It's like the interconnectedness of life is something that is always available to us, and we sleep on it. We sleep on it because our energy is sucked into this little device where we watch YouTube cat videos. And so one of the things I think we're not realizing is, how is tech taking our humanity away? You had some really profound thoughts on that. Could you share?
Yeah, again, it's within the general application of conscious choice or less conscious choice. Am I aware? Or if it decreases my awareness and my conscious choices, it is by definition evil. But technology is not that in essence. It can increase your conscious choices and awareness. It's just the fact that most of the direction that all humanity employs is towards more comfort and less consciousness, less conscious choice. So technology is another attribute, is another application of the same problem, but it shouldn't be blamed for what it is. When you are more challenged, tackled, which is now technology is also trying to help in that regard. You hear the voices in podcasts, neurologists and researchers speaking about the need for challenge. What is the dopamine system? What is testosterone about? How we need to place pleasure on the other side of a challenge. This is exactly it. But this has been known, well, since man was man, by practices, religions that pointed in this direction. This is not a new discovery. It's like, oh, we found dopamine and testosterone involved with, that process. Of course, this is just one more attribute, and you'll find many other extensions of that. So technology can be great. I'm not against technology, but in general, this is not what is happening right now. So the corrective means are sometimes to decrease certain use of mindless use of technology, and to try to use technology for more mindful, which I'm not a fan of the word, but more conscious and aware choices. Definitely not relying on technology for that. I don't recommend that.
You said something in it. It made me think, I'm not a fan of the word. When we were training, you said you were not a fan of the word imagination. As a storyteller, so much of my work is about inciting imagination, because the brain can't tell the difference between reality and imagination. And so as I try to help people navigate a tough decision, I'll drop them into a guided story, and there's the default future door and the other door. And so what is it about imagination that can be dangerous? Because I also think, like with anything, technology can be used for good or evil. What is your perspective on imagination?
The same exact answer. The problem with imagination, as it's usually portrayed when people use identification. You lose yourself. Imagination is not evil. But if you totally identify, oh, what a beautiful imagination he has, he totally identified. That's what we usually point at. But if I use imagination while consciously being here, choosing to employ it and to go, which is often called visualization or directed imagination, etc., not to lose myself in it. This is something that the meditation process is sometimes confused for. I go so deeply that I lose my choice of going deeply, and it becomes this self-motivating factor. I don't believe that is a real conscious, deep connection. Yet you move beyond a certain limited self, and that can be dissolved, but then a deeper self is always there, present and choosing, or else it is not yours. At least in some kind of area or level, it's not yours. This is something to realize and to think of. So imagination, great, but keep on choosing it and being aware of it, keep being present within that. And then it is as powerful as our imagined reality.
It makes me think also about where we're moving towards in the future. And we're living in times of great uncertainty. And I don't think humans neurologically are equipped for uncertainty. We're wired for being safe. Our brain's constantly trying to put us in survival mode. What fascinates me about your work, and I'm an anomaly because I get excited about the unknown. I think that's part of being a backpacker. It's just part of my nature. My mom says I was born without a rejection bone in my body. I'll come up and talk to anybody, right? That is terrifying for a lot of people. Uncertainty is terrifying for most people. So how do the tools that you employ in movement help facilitate humanity towards finding the gifts of uncertainty and embracing the unknown rather than resisting and fearing and creating more stress?
First, you don't get to choose. Things are uncertain, non-coherent, unknown. So it's any delusion of stability and certainty will be blown off. The black swan is on its way. We have to create a situation where we're working with that. We expect that. So for example, when I teach movement, I don't employ systems that are trying to stabilize the state, but to achieve a stability within the unstable nature of the state. For example, I'll recommend people to learn how to box instead of to do some traditional martial art. That tends to have a lot more an attempt to stabilize things, where in something very alive, this aliveness, alive practices, they contain that recognition, shit is gonna hit the fan. I'm gonna get hit in the face. I never went to a boxing class in all those decades that I didn't get hit in the face. I never went to a situation, an open situation, where I was controlling the situation 100%. This is the nature of things, and this is how life is. So even if you're a meditator or a traditional martial artist or something with trying to develop and control the scenario tightly by controlling your inner conditions, by controlling everything around you, well, obviously, that's not the way that you live your life. Tomorrow, you have a cold. In 10 years, you have, a heart attack. Eventually, you die. Things affect you. You do not move beyond them, even attempting to stabilize on some layer. So that's not really moving in a direction that is applicable. I still think there is a lot of value in such processes to stabilize certain conditions, but they must then be employed within the connection to the unknown. So that's what I'm trying to do. When I'm teaching people how to do a handstand, when I'm teaching people how to move on the ground, when I'm teaching people how to do partnering, when I'm teaching people through somatic processes, they always include this communication with the unknown, with the instability of the situation. And then you achieve a sense of stability that was very difficult to achieve otherwise without any delusions. Instead of changing the situation to feel fake stability, now you're not changing the situation. You take it as it is, but you are capable of dealing with it to a higher degree than before. You're going to get your heart broken. You're going to get hit in the face. We're going to twist an ankle next week, one of us. It's going to rain when I dress improper. This is going to be the nature of things. If you base yourself on something else, you're not going to achieve the proper stability in face of such situations. There is reality checks, and there is something else that, avoiding the reality checks, the wet tests. The other side, not to glorify anything, is to just mention the fact that things are going to go to shit, everything is going to go bad, and now we can't prepare anything, we can't work and control our inner conditions. That's another mistake. Now it becomes a very dirty process who lacks quality, lacks responsibility of our inner reactions, etc. Both of these processes, in my eyes, should be mingled together and combined to achieve a state which is the best possible state within a storm. the eye of the storm. My teacher calls it the eye of the storm.
I was noticing that those 2 weeks that we were training, I was still running my advisory full time. And all of a sudden, the problems that I had at work, the fires, the unexpected stuff, didn't rattle me because I had just spent 12 hours in the studio with you, with Odelia, working on stuff, failing, being the worst, falling on my face, getting back up, doing it again. And so I think what that showed me is that movement is the training for life. And people think it's like sometimes a nice to have, like, oh, I'll work out, I'll exercise. It's not about that. It's literally the training ground that prepares your mind, body, spirit for this experience of navigating uncertainty. That was kind of my biggest takeaway.
That's the problem with some things like these podcasts or these conversations, that really most people who listen to this are saying, oh, wow, amazing ideas. But what the hell do I do with it? Absolutely nothing. I don't know what to do with it. This stuff is unusable. Because one does not go, the space that we're offering here, I refuse to take that space and to fill it with tips and tricks. Yeah. Yet at the same time, there is not a space here for practice. Now, after listening to this, it's up to us from the next hour, the next day, to employ practice into this. And for me, the practice should include the physicality of the body, owning those ideas in face of. For example, you modulate your emotions, doing loving kindness meditation. I do it while somebody's hitting me. I am employing the process of modulating the emotions there, or somebody cursing me, or within a certain guided, conscious visualization that arises certain emotions, situations, conditions. I am employing you talk about excess concentration on the great focus of meditators. I give them a stick and I show that when the feedback is there is no focus to talk about. And then people say, yeah, but I didn't train it. That's not the point. The point is that we talk about development of general focus and concentration. And then when it's tested through mathematics, through physical exercises, through whatever, you expose the fact that it's all big talk. But if it's not wet tested, it might not be what we think it is. Because when I go to do meditation retreats, I'm not interested to sit for the rest of my life. I attempt to stabilize a condition within myself that I can employ in my life. But now I realize it's just stable within those conditions. Retreat junkies, meditation junkies, etc. There is nothing wrong with meditation, but eventually you should become meditation. So how is that happening? Well, let's examine it, and we see it's not there. This is the role of the practice. And that's why I'll speak and do a podcast once every 6 months or 5 months. But what do I do day to day? I practice. I practice physically, I practice mentally, emotionally. It's about that application. And that's why people are still feeling disconnected. And there is nothing I can do within this recorded conversation to bridge that gap besides to offer, here is a gate for a practice. Come in, study the practice, start to employ day to day. It's not about exercising your body, as you said. It's about exercising every part of you, every cell, every faculty. That is, for me, the practice. This is not offered. This is not happening most of the time. And hence, how can we live, stabilize the state within life, or live? People think I'm an extremist, that I demand so many hours and so much dedication to the practice, but eventually we want to bring it to life 24/7. So I am just approximating, I'm creating a bridge towards actually embodying that. If you don't practice in that way, and you kind of bounce between life and practice, there is just too huge of a gap. The practice is life.
The practice is life.
This is all about living life, practicing all the time.
I can't think of a better way to wrap this up than that. That was such a moment. Thank you for being a constant source, an inescapable source of real life education. It's beyond movement. You have touched my core in levels that have made me a better teacher, have made me a way more curious student. And it means a lot to me that you share with generosity of spirit your thoughts.
Thank you, my dear.